The sun beat down on Redemption, a town as unforgiving as its name suggested. Dust devils danced in the streets, mirroring the turmoil brewing in Sarah's heart. Today was the day her fate would be decided, not by her own hand, but by the cruel whims of Iron Harding. Harding, a man whose wealth was as vast as his cruelty, stood like a granite statue overlooking the rodeo arena. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the crowd, assessing potential buyers. He was a rancher who saw people as property, and Sarah was his latest acquisition, a debt owed and now called in. The rodeo was in full swing, a spectacle of bucking broncos and daring riders, but beneath the surface of entertainment lay a dark undercurrent. The air crackled with anticipation, a morbid curiosity hanging over the crowd. They had come to witness a spectacle, a woman auctioned off like cattle. Sarah stood beside Harding, her head bowed, trying to disappear into the shadows. Her dress, once a vibrant blue, was now faded and worn, a reflection of her spirit. She longed for escape, for a life free from Harding's grasp, but hope seemed a distant dream. Unbeknownst to her, a pair of eyes watched from the edge of the crowd. Cole, a lone cowboy with a haunted past, saw the desperation in Sarah's eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands. He recognized the injustice, the blatant disregard for human dignity. A fire ignited within him, a resolve to intervene no matter the cost. He tightened his grip on the worn leather of his saddle, a silent promise forming in his mind. He wouldn't let her become another victim of Harding's tyranny. Sarah's servitude to Harding had begun innocently enough. Her father, a small-time farmer, had borrowed money to save his failing crops, alone with Iron Harding as the lender. When the crops failed again, and her father passed away from grief and exhaustion, the debt fell to Sarah. Harding, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to add another worker to his vast ranch. At first she worked the fields, her hands growing calloused, her back aching under the relentless sun. But Harding had other plans. He saw her beauty, a delicate flower blooming in the harsh landscape, and decided she was worth more than her labor. He moved her into the main house, ostensibly as a maid, but his intentions were clear. Sarah resisted, clinging to her dignity, but Harding was a patient predator. He chipped away at her spirit, isolating her from any semblance of friendship, reminding her constantly of her debt. The auction was the culmination of his plan, a public display of his power and her helplessness. Now, standing beside him in the arena, she felt a hollowness in her chest. The faces in the crowd blurred, their gazes like physical blows. She focused on a distant point, a lone hawk circling overhead, wishing she could soar away, escaping this nightmare. She heard the murmur of the crowd, the announcer's booming voice, but the words were meaningless. Her fate was sealed, or so she thought, until she saw the glint of determination in the eyes of a stranger. Cole leaned against the rough-hewn fence, his hat pulled low, shielding his eyes from the harsh glare of the sun and the spectacle unfolding before him. He wasn't a man who frequented rodeos. The noise, the crowds, the blatant displays of wealth and power, they all grated on him. But something had drawn him to Redemption today, a sense of unease he couldn't shake. He'd heard whispers of Harding's cruelty, stories that painted him as a man who cared for nothing but land and money. He dismissed them as rumors, exaggerations born of jealousy, until he saw Sarah. The way she stood, head bowed, shoulders slumped, spoke volumes. She looked like a trapped bird, desperate for flight. Cole had seen that look before, in the eyes of others who had been broken by circumstance, by the weight of injustice. He knew what it was like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone who held all the cards. His own past was a landscape of scars, a testament to the battles he had fought and the losses he had endured. He wasn't a hero, not by any stretch of the imagination. He was a wanderer, a man haunted by his mistakes. But he couldn't stand by and watch Harding exploit Sarah, treat her like a piece of property. The fire in his belly burned hotter with each passing moment, fueled by a sense of righteous anger and a flicker of something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. He straightened his back, his gaze hardening. It was time to act. The auction began. The announcer, a portly man with a booming voice, introduced Sarah as if she were a prize-winning mare. He extolled her virtues, highlighting her beauty and her docile nature, each word a hammer blow to Sarah's already fragile spirit. Bids started low, hesitant, but Harding's presence loomed large, intimidating any potential bidders who might have questioned the morality of the situation. Cole watched, his jaw tightening. He could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken agreement to participate in this charade. He scanned the crowd, searching for a sign of dissent, a flicker of humanity, but found only a sea of faces, some curious, some indifferent, some openly lecherous. The bids climbed higher, fueled by whiskey and the promise of owning a beautiful woman. Sarah remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the ground, her hands clenched into fists. Cole knew he had to act, and he had to act fast. He couldn't let this continue, not for another minute. He glanced around, assessing the situation. Harding's men were positioned around the arena, their eyes sharp, their hands resting on their guns. Any direct confrontation would be suicide, not just for him, but for Sarah as well. He needed a distraction, something big, something chaotic. His gaze fell on the gate holding back the rodeo bulls, a spark of an idea igniting in his mind. It was a reckless plan, bordering on insane, but it was the only chance he saw. He just hoped he wouldn't get them both killed. The bidding reached a fever pitch. Harding smirked. Cole made his move. With a swiftness born of desperation and years spent handling livestock, Cole moved like a phantom. He skirted the edge of the crowd, using the bodies as cover, his eyes fixed on the gate. Two burly cowboys stood guard, their backs to him, engrossed in the spectacle of the auction. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the small, sharp knife he always carried. He approached the gate, his footsteps muffled by the roar of the crowd. The cowboys were oblivious, their attention still focused on the auction. He took a deep breath, steeling his nerves. This had to be precise. In one fluid motion, he reached out and slashed the rope holding the gate closed. The thick hemp fibers parted with a snap, the sudden release of tension almost imperceptible amidst the noise. He didn't wait to see the result. He turned and ran, pushing his way back through the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. A split second later, the world exploded. The gate burst open, and a torrent of angry bulls surged into the arena, their hooves pounding the earth, their bellows shaking the very foundations of redemption. The crowd erupted in screams and chaos, a wave of panic washing over the rodeo grounds. Cole knew his plan had worked perhaps too well. Now came the hard part, getting Sarah out alive. He scanned the arena, searching for her amidst the swirling dust and the stampeding cattle. He spotted her near the auction platform, her face pale with terror, Harding frozen in disbelief beside her. This was his chance. He had to reach her before it was too late. The ground trembled as Cole navigated the chaos, dodging panicked crowds and charging bulls. He saw a massive Brahma bull bearing down on Sarah, its eyes wild with rage. Harding, finally snapping out of his stupor, grabbed Sarah's arm, intending to drag her to safety, but he was too slow, too stunned. Cole didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, tackling Harding to the ground just as the bull thundered past, missing them by mere inches. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain. He reached for Sarah, his hand closing around her wrist. "Come with me," he yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, didn't resist. She followed him blindly, her trust placed in this stranger who had just saved her life. They ran together, weaving through the stampeding bulls, their movements synchronized, their determination unwavering. A bull charged towards them, its horns lowered, its intent clear. Cole pulled Sarah behind him, shielding her with his body. He grabbed a discarded plank of wood and swung it with all his might, striking the bull squarely on the head. The animal bellowed in pain and veered away, giving them a momentary reprieve. They reached the edge of the arena, scrambling over the fence, their clothes torn, their bodies bruised, but their spirits unbroken. They didn't stop running until they were well away from the rodeo grounds, the screams and the bellows fading behind them. They had escaped the stampede, but their ordeal was far from over. They were now fugitives, hunted by Harding and his men, their only hope lying in their ability to outrun and outsmart their pursuers. As they paused to catch their breath, Sarah looked at Cole, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved my life." Cole knew they couldn't stay put. Harding's men would be scouring the countryside, their bloodhounds sniffing out their trail. He grabbed Sarah's hand, his grip firm but gentle. "We need to find horses," he said, his eyes scanning the horizon, "and we need to find them fast." They ran through the scrub brush, their lungs burning, their legs aching. The sun beat down on them mercilessly, the heat reflecting off the parched earth. They could hear the distant sound of horses, the unmistakable sign that their pursuers were closing in. They stumbled upon a small ranch, a dilapidated shack surrounded by a rickety fence. A lone horse grazed in the pasture, its head down, oblivious to the drama unfolding nearby. Cole knew it was a risk, but they had no choice. He quickly assessed the situation. The ranch appeared deserted, the windows boarded up, the door hanging off its hinges. He boosted Sarah over the fence, then followed her, his movements swift and silent. He approached the horse, speaking to it in a low, soothing voice. The animal, startled at first, quickly calmed down, sensing his gentle nature. He fashioned a makeshift bridle out of rope and helped Sarah mount the horse. Just as they were about to ride off, they heard the sound of approaching horses, much closer this time. Harding's men had found them. Cole knew they were outgunned and outmanned. Their only chance was to run, to disappear into the vast wilderness, to become ghosts in the wind. He leaped onto the horse behind Sarah, urging it forward with a kick. The horse bolted, its hooves pounding the earth, carrying them away from the ranch and into the unknown. The chase was on. The horse, a sturdy palomino, galloped across the open plains, its hooves kicking up dust devils in its wake. Cole urged it onward, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of pursuit. Sarah clung to him tightly, her fear palpable, her trust absolute. They rode for hours, the sun slowly sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The landscape changed from flat plains to rolling hills, offering them some cover from their pursuers. As darkness descended, Cole knew they had to find a place to rest, a place where they could tend to their wounds and plan their next move. They came across a small cave hidden behind a thicket of trees. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter from the elements and a degree of protection from their enemies. Cole helped Sarah dismount, his eyes lingering on her face. She was exhausted, her clothes torn, her skin scratched and bruised, but her spirit remained unbroken. He built a small fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the cave walls. Sarah sat beside him, shivering in the cold night air. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders, his touch sending a shiver down her spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. Cole knew they couldn't stay here for long. Harding's men would be tracking them, their determination fueled by the ranchers' insatiable desire for revenge. But for now, they were safe, at least for a little while. He looked at Sarah, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames, and knew that he would do everything in his power to protect her, no matter the cost. Their journey had just begun. Cole rummaged through his saddlebags, pulling out a small flask of whiskey and a piece of clean cloth. He offered the whiskey to Sarah, who hesitated before taking a small sip. The liquid burned its way down her throat, but it warmed her from the inside out. He dipped the cloth in the remaining whiskey and gently began to clean her cuts and bruises. Sarah winced at the touch, but she didn't pull away. She watched Cole, his face etched with concern, his hands gentle and sure. She couldn't help but wonder about this man, this stranger who had risked everything to save her. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why did you do it?" Cole paused, his gaze meeting hers. He saw the fear and the confusion in her eyes, but he also saw a spark of resilience, a refusal to be broken. "I couldn't stand by and watch," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "It wasn't right." Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her hands. "You didn't even know me," she said. "Sometimes," Cole replied, "you don't need to know someone to know that they deserve better." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Cole finished tending to her wounds, then began to clean his own. He had a deep gash on his arm, a souvenir from his encounter with the Brahma bull. Sarah watched him, her heart aching for this man who had suffered so much for her sake. She reached out and gently touched his arm, her fingers tracing the line of the wound. "Let me," she said, her voice soft. Cole hesitated, then nodded. He handed her the cloth and the whiskey, and Sarah carefully cleaned his wound, her touch light and soothing. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the strength in his arms, the scars that told a story of a life lived on the edge. She wondered what secrets he held, what demons he battled. She knew that their journey together would be fraught with danger, but she also knew that she wasn't alone anymore. She had Cole, and that gave her hope. Cole stared into the fire, his eyes distant, lost in the labyrinth of his past. The flames danced and flickered, mirroring the turmoil within him. He hadn't spoken about his past in years, preferring to bury it deep, to pretend it never happened. But Sarah's presence, her unwavering gaze, forced him to confront the ghosts that haunted him. He saw flashes of memories, a dusty town much like Redemption but filled with laughter and hope, a loving family, their faces now blurred by time and grief, a fateful decision, a moment of weakness that changed everything. He had been young, reckless, driven by ambition and a thirst for adventure. He had fallen in with the wrong crowd, men who saw the world as something to be taken, not cherished. He had made choices that he regretted, choices that had cost him everything. He saw the face of a woman, her eyes filled with disappointment and betrayal. He had broken her heart, shattered her dreams, all in the pursuit of something that ultimately proved to be meaningless. He had lost her, lost his family, lost his innocence. He had spent years wandering the West, trying to outrun his past, to escape the guilt that gnawed at his soul. He had tried to forget, but the memories always resurfaced, like a persistent ache that refused to fade. He had come to Redemption seeking anonymity, a place where he could disappear, where he could live out his days in quiet solitude. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. He had seen Sarah, seen her desperation, and something inside him had stirred, a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could find redemption by saving her. He wasn't sure if he deserved it, but he knew he had to try. He owed it to himself, and he owed it to the ghosts of his past. The fire crackled and Cole blinked, snapping back to the present. Sarah was still watching him, her eyes filled with concern. He knew he couldn't tell her everything, not yet. But he could tell her enough. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice low and hesitant, the words tumbling out like stones from a long-sealed tomb. Cole spoke for a long time, his voice filled with a mixture of pain and regret. He told Sarah about his family, about his mistakes, about the woman he had loved and lost. He didn't sugarcoat anything, laying bare his flaws and his failures. When he was finished, he looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with vulnerability. Sarah reached out and took his hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice soft. "It couldn't have been easy." Cole nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "It wasn't," he said, "but it helped." Now it was Sarah's turn. She took a deep breath and began to tell Cole her story, starting with her father's ill-fated loan and ending with the auction in Redemption. She spoke of her dreams, of owning a small farm, of raising a family, of living a life of peace and tranquility. She spoke of her fear of Harding, of his cruelty and his relentless pursuit of power. As she spoke, Cole listened intently, his eyes filled with anger and compassion. He couldn't believe the injustice she had suffered, the way Harding had manipulated and exploited her. He vowed to protect her, to help her achieve her dreams, no matter the cost. When she was finished, Sarah looked at Cole, her eyes filled with hope and determination. "I don't want to run forever," she said. "I want to fight back. I want to take back my life." Cole smiled, his heart swelling with admiration. He had known from the moment he saw her that she was special, that she possessed a strength that belied her gentle nature. Now he knew for sure. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who deserved a second chance, and he was going to help her get it. "Then that's what we'll do," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We'll fight back." Meanwhile, back in Redemption, Iron Harding was a man consumed by rage. The humiliation of the Rodeo Stampede, the loss of Sarah, the disruption of his carefully laid plans, it all fueled his fury. He paced his office, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with vengeance. He summoned his men, a motley crew of hardened outlaws and ruthless mercenaries, offering them a hefty reward for the capture of Cole and Sarah. He wanted them brought back alive, so he could make them pay for their defiance. He wanted to break their spirits, to crush their will, to remind them that no one crossed Iron Harding and got away with it. He had the resources, the manpower, and the influence to scour the entire territory. He sent riders to every town, every ranch, every outpost, spreading the word, offering a bounty for information. He employed trackers, men skilled in the art of following trails, men who could sniff out their prey like bloodhounds. He even contacted the local sheriff, a corrupt official who owed Harding a favor, ordering him to turn a blind eye to his activities, to let him operate outside the law. He wasn't concerned with justice. He was concerned with revenge. He sat at his desk, a map of the territory spread out before him, his fingers tracing the possible routes Cole and Sarah might take. He knew they were heading west towards the mountains, towards the border. He would cut them off, trap them, corner them like rats. He smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a chill down the spines of his men. He had Sarah and Cole right where he wanted them. It was only a matter of time before he had them back in his grasp. The hunt was on, and Iron Harding wouldn't rest until he had his revenge. Days turned into nights as Cole and Sarah continued their flight westward. They evaded Harding's trackers by traveling through treacherous terrain, relying on Cole's knowledge of the land and Sarah's growing resilience. However, supplies were dwindling, and the relentless pursuit was taking its toll. Cole knew they needed help, but trusting anyone was a risk. He remembered a hidden outlaw camp nestled in the mountains, a place where he had sought refuge in his younger, more reckless days. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was their only option. The camp was a haven for outcasts and renegades, men and women who lived outside the law, bound together by a shared distrust of civilization. Cole led Sarah through a secret mountain pass, finally arriving at the camp under the cover of darkness. The camp leader, a grizzled old gunslinger named Jedediah, greeted Cole with suspicion. He remembered Cole's past, his association with Harding, and he wasn't sure he could be trusted. But Cole pleaded his case, explaining Sarah's plight and their need for assistance. Jedediah, a man who had seen his fair share of injustice, reluctantly agreed to help, but he made it clear that their welcome was conditional. They had to earn their keep, and they had to abide by the camp's rules. Sarah was wary of these outlaws, their rough manners and their questionable morals. But she saw a glimmer of humanity beneath their hardened exteriors, a sense of loyalty and a willingness to fight for what they believed in. She knew that they were walking a dangerous line, but she also knew that they had found a temporary sanctuary, a place where they could catch their breath and... Life in the outlaw camp was harsh and unforgiving, but it offered a semblance of safety, a temporary respite from the relentless pursuit of Harding's men. To earn their keep, Cole and Sarah were assigned various tasks, from tending to the horses to helping with the cooking. Cole, recognizing Sarah's vulnerability and her lack of experience in the wilderness, took it upon himself to teach her survival skills. He showed her how to track animals, how to build a fire, how to find edible plants, how to defend herself with a knife. At first, Sarah struggled, her city-bred hands clumsy and unaccustomed to the rough work. But she was a quick learner, her determination fueled by a desire to protect herself and to prove her worth to Cole and to the outlaws. As they worked side by side, their connection deepened. Cole admired Sarah's resilience, her unwavering spirit in the face of adversity. Sarah saw beyond Cole's gruff exterior, recognizing the kindness and the courage that lay beneath. He taught her how to shoot a gun, starting with target practice, gradually increasing the difficulty. She surprised him with her natural ability, her steady hand, and her sharp eye. He realized that she was more than just a damsel in distress. She was a woman capable of anything she set her mind to. One evening, as they sat by the fire cleaning their weapons, Sarah looked at Cole, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for teaching me, for believing in me." Cole smiled, his heart swelling with affection. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You've got the heart of a lion, Sarah. You just needed someone to show you how to use it." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world. The air in the outlaw camp was thick with unspoken desires. Cole and Sarah found themselves drawn to each other, their connection deepening with each passing day. The shared danger, the mutual respect, the growing affection, it all created a potent brew of romantic tension. One night, after a long day of training, Cole and Sarah found themselves alone, standing beneath a canopy of stars. The moon cast a silvery glow on the camp, bathing everything in an ethereal light. The air was still and quiet, the only sound the distant howl of a coyote. Sarah looked at Cole, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and longing. She had never felt this way about anyone before. He was her protector, her mentor, her friend, and something more, something she couldn't quite define. Cole felt the same pull, the same irresistible attraction. He had tried to resist it, to deny it, knowing that a relationship between them was dangerous, that it could jeopardize their mission. But he couldn't fight it any longer. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. Sarah closed her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what was coming, and she didn't want to stop it. Cole lowered his head and gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, a hesitant exploration of uncharted territory. But as their passion grew, the kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, her body pressed against his. She had never felt so alive, so free, so utterly and completely consumed by another person. Suddenly, a shout shattered the silence. "Riders coming." "Harding's men." "Oh, the kiss." Chaos erupted in the outlaw camp. The shout served as a warning, but Harding's men were already upon them, guns blazing. The outlaws scrambled for cover, returning fire, the night air filled with the sound of gunfire and screams. Cole grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her towards the back of the camp. "We have to get out of here," he yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. He knew that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Staying to fight would be suicide. Jedediah and the other outlaws put up a valiant defense, but Harding's men were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. The camp was quickly overrun, the outlaws falling one by one. Cole and Sarah managed to reach the horses, dodging bullets and leaping over fallen bodies. They mounted a pair of steeds and galloped away from the camp, leaving the battle behind them. As they rode, they could hear the screams and the gunfire fading behind them. They knew that many of the outlaws had perished, their temporary sanctuary turned into a graveyard. They rode through the night, their hearts heavy with grief and guilt. They had brought this violence to the outlaw camp, putting everyone in danger. They couldn't help but wonder if they were cursed, if they were destined to bring destruction wherever they went. As the sun began to rise, they reached a mountain pass, a narrow trail that led to the other side of the range. They knew that Harding's men would be. Knowing that Harding's men would be hot on their trail, Cole and Sarah pushed onward, their horses weary, their spirits flagging. They needed a place to rest, a place to regroup, a place where they could find some semblance of peace. Cole remembered hearing stories of a Native American tribe that lived in the mountains, a tribe that had managed to remain hidden from the encroaching settlers, a tribe that possessed a deep connection to the land. He knew it was a long shot, but he also knew that they had nothing to lose. They followed the mountain trails, their horses carefully navigating the treacherous terrain. After days of relentless travel, they finally came across a small village, nestled in a hidden valley, surrounded by towering peaks. The villagers, wary of outsiders, greeted them with suspicion. They were a proud and independent people, fiercely protective of their way of life, but Cole pleaded their case, explaining their plight, their need for help. The tribe's chief, a wise and compassionate woman named Morning Star, listened intently, her eyes filled with understanding. She saw the desperation in their faces, the weariness in their bodies, the spark of hope in their hearts. She agreed to help them, offering them shelter and food, teaching them about the land, about the importance of respect and balance. She shared stories of her people, their history, their traditions, their deep connection to the natural world. Sarah was fascinated by the tribe's wisdom, their reverence for nature, their simple way of life. She learned about the healing properties of plants, about the importance of community, about the interconnectedness of all things. She began to see the world in a new light, to appreciate the beauty and the fragility of the land. Cole also found solace in the tribe's teachings, their emphasis on forgiveness and redemption. He realized that their newfound peace was shattered when a group of encroaching settlers, driven by greed and a thirst for land, began to encroach upon the tribe's territory. They felled trees, dammed streams, and threatened the tribe's way of life. The tribe, peaceful by nature, tried to reason with the settlers, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The settlers, emboldened by their numbers and their weapons, became increasingly aggressive, threatening violence if the tribe did not leave their ancestral lands. Sarah, witnessing the injustice, felt a surge of anger and determination. She couldn't stand by and watch as these innocent people were driven from their homes. She knew that she had to do something, anything, to help them defend themselves. Drawing on the skills that Cole had taught her, she helped the tribe prepare for a possible attack. She taught them how to build defenses, how to use their knowledge of the land to their advantage, how to fight back if necessary. When the settlers finally attacked, Sarah stood alongside the tribe, her rifle in hand, her eyes filled with determination. She fought bravely, her courage inspiring the tribe to stand their ground. Using a combination of strategy and skill, the tribe managed to repel the settlers, driving them back into the mountains. The settlers, surprised by the tribe's resistance and Sarah's unexpected bravery, retreated, vowing to return with reinforcements. Morning Star approached Sarah, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have a warrior's heart," she said. "You have shown us that even the smallest person can make a difference." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had never felt so alive, so purposeful, so connected to something greater than herself. She had found her voice, her strength, her place in the world, and she knew that. As the dust settled from the skirmish with the settlers, Cole found himself wrestling with a long-buried secret. He knew that it was only a matter of time before Harding discovered their location, and he knew that when he did, things would get much more complicated. He had kept his past hidden from Sarah, afraid of what she would think of him, afraid of shattering the fragile bond that they had formed. But he couldn't keep it a secret any longer. He owed it to her to tell her the truth. He found her sitting by the river, her face etched with worry. He sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "there's something I need to tell you, something about my past." He took a deep breath and began to explain. He told her about his younger days, about his ambition and his recklessness. He told her about his association with Iron Harding, about the deals they had made, about the things he had done that he wasn't proud of. He explained that he had once been Harding's right-hand man, his enforcer, the one who carried out his dirty work. He had been blinded by the promise of wealth and power, willing to do anything to get ahead. But then, something had happened, something that had changed everything. He had witnessed Harding commit an unspeakable act of cruelty, an act that had shattered his illusions and forced him to confront the darkness within himself. He had turned against Harding, betraying him, exposing his crimes to the authorities. But Harding had managed to escape justice, vowing to make Cole pay for his betrayal. Sarah listened intently, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. She couldn't believe that the man she had come to trust, the man she had come to love, had once been associated with someone as evil as Iron Harding. She pulled her hand away from his. Sarah was stunned by Cole's confession, the revelation shaking her trust to its core. But after a long night of soul-searching, she realized that she couldn't abandon him. She saw the pain in his eyes, the genuine remorse for his past actions. She knew that he was a changed man, a man who was willing to risk everything to protect her. When Harding and his men finally arrived, they found Cole and Sarah standing side by side, ready to face their fate. The tribe, honoring their commitment to protect them, stood with them, forming a united front against the encroaching darkness. Harding, his face twisted with rage, dismounted his horse, his eyes fixed on Cole. "You betrayed me," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll pay for that." Cole stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "I'm not afraid of you, Harding," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "I'm not the same man I used to be." Harding laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the valley. "You think you've changed? You're still a coward, Cole." "A traitor." The air crackled with tension as the two men faced each other, their hatred palpable. The silence was shattered by the sound of gunfire, the bullets flying, the battle commencing. Cole and Harding engaged in a fierce duel, their skills evenly matched, their determination unwavering. They dodged bullets, parried blows, their movements swift and precise. The battle raged around them, the tribe and Harding's men locked in a deadly struggle. Sarah fought bravely, her rifle blazing, her courage inspiring those around her. Finally, Cole and Harding found themselves face to face, their guns empty, their bodies battered and bruised. They engaged in hand-to-hand combat, their fists flying, their bodies colliding. The fight was brutal, their strength waning, their determination. As Cole and Harding grappled, their fight took them near a steep cliff overlooking the valley. Harding, fueled by rage, managed to gain the upper hand, pushing Cole towards the edge. Cole struggled to maintain his balance, his body teetering precariously on the brink. Seeing Cole in danger, Sarah knew that she had to act. She couldn't let Harding win, not after everything they had been through. She scanned the battlefield, searching for an opportunity, a way to help. She spotted a loose rock, a large boulder that was perched precariously on the hillside. An idea sparked in her mind, a desperate gamble that could change the course of the battle. She stealthily made her way towards the boulder, her movements silent and swift. She reached the rock and began to push, her muscles straining, her determination unwavering. With a final surge of effort, she managed to dislodge the boulder. It tumbled down the hillside, gathering speed as it careened towards Cole and Harding. Harding, distracted by the approaching danger, lost his grip on Cole. The boulder slammed into him, sending him tumbling over the cliff, his screams fading into the distance. Cole, stunned but unharmed, watched as Harding disappeared over the edge. He knew that it was over, that Harding was finally defeated. The remaining settlers, seeing their leader vanquished, lost their will to fight. They surrendered, their dreams of conquest shattered. The battle was over, the tribe victorious, their land saved. Sarah, her body exhausted, her spirit soaring, ran to Cole, throwing her arms around him. "You saved us," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved everyone." Cole held her tightly, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. He knew that Sarah was the one who had truly saved them, her courage and her resourcefulness turning the tide of the battle. He had found his redemption, and she had found her strength. Together they had conquered their demons and emerged victorious. The tribe cheered, their voices echoing through the valley, celebrating their freedom and their newfound peace. With Harding gone and the threat to the tribe extinguished, Cole and Sarah faced a new beginning. They had been through so much together, their bond forged in the fires of danger and adversity. They had found love in the most unlikely of places, and they were determined to build a life together, a life filled with peace, freedom, and happiness. They decided to leave the tribe, knowing that their presence would only bring more trouble. They thanked Morning Star and the other villagers for their kindness and their support, promising to never forget their wisdom and their generosity. They rode off into the sunset, their hearts filled with hope and anticipation. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew that they would face it together, hand in hand, their love a beacon in the vast and unforgiving wilderness. They found a small plot of land near a crystal-clear river, a place where they could build their dream home, a place where they could raise a family. They worked tirelessly, their hands calloused, their bodies aching, but their spirits high. Cole used his skills as a cowboy to tend to the land, planting crops, building fences, and caring for the animals. Sarah used her newfound knowledge of herbs and healing to tend to the sick and injured, becoming a respected member of the community. They built a small cabin, a cozy sanctuary where they could escape the harsh realities of the world. They filled it with love and laughter, their hearts overflowing with joy. They were finally free from the shackles of their past, free to embrace their future. They had found their redemption, their peace, their happiness. And they knew that their love would endure, a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the Wild West. Their journey had just begun, a journey filled with promise and possibility, a journey that they would embark on together, forever bound by their shared experiences and their unwavering love. Years passed, the small cabin that Cole and Sarah had built grew into a sprawling ranch, a testament to their hard work and their unwavering love. The barren land blossomed into a thriving oasis, a beacon of hope in the harsh and unforgiving wilderness. Children's laughter filled the air, their joyful cries echoing through the valley. Cole and Sarah had a family now, a brood of rambunctious youngsters who inherited their parents' courage, their resilience, and their unwavering spirit. Cole, his past finally behind him, became a respected leader in the community, a man known for his fairness, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to justice. He used his skills as a cowboy to help others, to protect the innocent, and to ensure that no one suffered the same fate as Sarah. Sarah, her spirit unbroken, became a renowned healer, her knowledge of herbs and her compassionate heart drawing people from miles around. She used her experiences to empower others, to teach them self-reliance, and to inspire them to never give up on their dreams. They often sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, their hands intertwined, their hearts filled with gratitude. They had faced their demons, conquered their fears, and found their happily ever after in the most unlikely of places. The Wild West was still a dangerous place, a land filled with challenges and uncertainties. But Cole and Sarah knew that they could face anything, as long as they had each other. Their love was a shield, their courage a weapon, and their determination a compass guiding them through the uncharted territories of life. They had found their freedom, their peace, their happiness, and they knew that their story would live on, a legend whispered around campfires, a testament to the power of love, redemption, and the enduring spirit of the Wild West. The end.